Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 46, verse 15. Chapter 46, verse 15. So Yaakov is going down to Egypt. Yaakov is going down to Egypt with his family. And we begin to list off the family of Yaakov. And we've gone through a whole segment and children and grandchildren. And now verse 15 is sort of like the end of the first paragraph. And it says, Eila b'nei Leah sheyoldo Yaakov b'fadan Aram b'yesti navito. These are the children of Leah. Kol nefesh banav nosav shloshim v'shalosh. All of the children, his sons, his daughters, they add up to 33. The only problem is if you look at the Chumash and you add up the names, you're only going to get 32. So the obvious question is, where's the 33rd person? Let's go to the Ramban on Pasuk Tesvav. So he starts off by citing a very famous medrash, which Rashi cites. Ramban on Tesvav, Shloshim v'shalosh u'befrat ani atamotzi el shloshim u'shtayim. And when you add them up, there's only 32. Elazu Yocheved, Shalnodo b'chnisasan li'ir. A very famous thing that Yocheved, the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, was born as they came into the city. Shenemar sheyoldo sal Levi b'Mitzrayim. Pasuk refers to Yocheved as the one who was born to Levi in Egypt. Like Dasav Mitzrayim vein Harasav Mitzrayim. She wasn't conceived in Egypt; she was born in Egypt. Suishitas Rabba Seidman. That is a Gemara. So it's a very, very famous thing. That's the mystery 33rd. Okay. For Rabbi Avram Heishiv, the Yomar Kizatema, the Ibn Ezra asks on this. He says it's very difficult to understand. In Cain, Lamalo Hiskar Kasava Pella, Shanasa Ima Sholida Moshe, Vibasmeo Shloshim Shana. So the Ibn Ezra pulls out his calculator and says, hold on a second. So if Yocheved is born as they're coming into Egypt, Yocheved, as we mentioned, is the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu. We know when Moshe was born. Moshe was born 130 years into the Jewish people's stay in Egypt, which means that Yocheved would have been 130 years old when her son was born. V'lama Hizkir Dvar Sarah Shaisa Bas Tishim. So if I were to ask you quick, what's the biggest miracle in the Chumash regarding an elderly woman having a child? You would say, sure, Sarah had Yitzchak when she was 90. Says the Ibn Ezra, according to this medrash, that's small potatoes. Yocheved was 130 when she had Moshe. And the Torah doesn't tell us about it. Okay, so he's very upset by it. The Ramban doesn't cite the Ibn Ezra's own shot, but the Ibn Ezra says that basically Yaakov counts as one of the 33. In other words, we're mentioning the branches of Yaakov's family. So we're talking about the largest branch of Yaakov's family, which is the branch of Leah. She had the most children. So we throw Yaakov in because we want to say there's 70 when they go down to Egypt. So Yaakov is one of the 70. So his number is tucked into Leah's branch. That's what the Ibn Ezra says. Going on, skipping a few lines. So the Ramban says, listen, the Ibn Ezra thinks he has a really good point regarding this medrash. I need to stand up for the medrash. V'omar. So I'm going to say, Ki al kol pan miyeh b'dvar Yocheved pelagadol min anisa b'nastaros shei misod Torah. Clearly, this would be a non-advertised miracle, the idea of Yocheved bearing Moshe, which is the idea of believing in miracles, says the Ramban, is one of the foundations of the Torah. Ki bas Levi atzmo, lo misyaches elav. She was Levi's daughter, which kasav sheyoldo so Levi Mitzrayim, v'od kasav es Yocheved dodaso. V'nei im nomar ki holid osav bebacharuso, kasher holid kol banav, v'haisale dasa acharida to Mitzrayim ma'at, hine hibeledes Moshe's zakena ma'od. So the Ramban says, let's just clarify what our issue is here. So if the Ibn Ezra's issue is, how could it be that she was born as they came in? That would mean she was 130 when she gave birth to Moshe. So the Ramban says, okay, let's think this through. The Torah refers to her as the daughter of Levi. Now, it could be that that's not literal. Maybe it means she's the granddaughter of Levi, but the Torah refers to her as the daughter of Levi. He also says the Torah refers to her as the aunt, literally translated, the aunt of Amram. Now, again, Doda so could be sort of relative, female relative, but just literal, it's the aunt of Amram. So the Ramban says if you take this literally, she's the daughter of Levi. So you know what? Let's say she wasn't born when they came into Egypt. Let's say she was born 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later. I mean, she's still an elderly woman when she gives birth to Moshe, right? She was born 30 years after they came into Egypt. She'd be 100 when she gave birth to Moshe. So he says, I don't know what the Ibn Ezra thinks he's gaining exactly. Maybe Levi lived many, many years in Egypt before he gave birth to Yocheved. Let's say 57 years after they came in. Okay, maybe that's when Yocheved was born. Ben Me'ashana. Then guess what, says the Ramban? Levi's going to be 100 when Yocheved's born. If you know, the blanket only covers so much here. Whatever you pull, something else is going to get uncovered. So if you want it to be that she was born much later, fine. But then that means her parents are very old when she's born. He's capable as Moshe Bas Ayin Gimel. Says, by the way, so if we say that she's born 57 years into the stay in Egypt, that means her father was 100 years old when she was born. That's part of the miracle with Avram and Yitzchak, right? That Avram was 100 when Yitzchak was born. And just to top it off, says Ramban, that means she's 73 when she gives birth to Moshe. That's still pretty impressive. You know what? So maybe she was born later than 57 years after their stay in Egypt. You know, Avram. Then if the Ibn Ezra is so bothered that we don't make a big deal about how old she was when she gave birth to Moshe, why don't we make a big deal about how old Levi was when he bore Yocheved? I want to tell you something that's very clear in the Torah. If a miracle is prophesied by a prophet, or an angel comes and announces with the proxy of God that a certain miracle is going to occur, yes, kirei makaseh. Those miracles are mentioned in the pasuk. When there was a prophecy about something, there was a message from God about something, then when it happens, it's mentioned. But there's another type of miracle. Things that sort of happen seemingly on their own. Lazar tzaddik, to help a righteous person. Or lahachris rasha, or to bring the demise of a wicked person. Lo yaskiro b'torah b'neviim. There's all kinds of examples that God orchestrates events that don't get mentioned in Tanakh. Okay. And he says, skipping a couple lines, Kol Yesodos HaTorah B'Nisim Nistarim. All the foundations of the Torah are hidden miracles. V'ma Torah en b'chol inyano rak nisim lo teva uminag. Shari Yehuda Torah kulam oso sumosim. The Torah in general is full of signs and wonders. Klo yikares v'yomus b'teva ha'ba'al achas min ha'arayos o ha'ochel chelav. The Torah talks about punishments from heaven for things that happen, for sins that we do. Isn't that a miracle? It's the idea that a person did a certain act and the person's life might be shortened. We don't know why a person's life is shortened. If a person lived a short life, that doesn't mean they sinned. But the Torah says it could happen. So isn't that God coming into world events? Isn't that miraculous? The Torah talks about when Shemitah comes, that if people observe Shemitah appropriately, they'll be very blessed. And if people observe Shemitah inappropriately, they'll have terrible difficulty in the land. Isn't that miraculous? You go tell a farmer, or you go tell a meteorologist that the weather patterns are going to be dictated by the Jewish people's patterns about Shemitah. That's a miracle. The whole idea of prayer. What in the world is prayer about? Prayer is about the acceptance and belief that God can involve himself with events and does involve himself with events. Ela she'ein b'hem shinui mefursam b'tivo shel olam. But it's not an obvious change in things. So really, really interesting point from the Ramban. And just to summarize, he goes on much longer, but just to summarize, the Ramban's basic answer to the Ibn Ezra is there's two types of miracles that happen in this world. The more common miracle is God involving himself in world events. It could be on a world scale, on a national scale, it could be on a personal scale, to get someone or something from A to B. That's one possibility. And those things the Torah doesn't make a big deal about. If you're watching closely and if you put things together and you recognize miracles, like the Ibn Ezra's observation, yes, that would mean it was a miracle. But then there's other types of miracles that are there to make a point to a person or to the world. And to the extent that the miracle was about making a point, the Torah tells us about it. So Sarah's bearing Yitzchak at her advanced age. So the whole concept is that, wow, this is what it means that Abraham is rewarded by God. It was inspiration to so many in the world. So the Torah makes a big deal about it. But it's not that there's some metric of what's a big deal miracle, what's not a big deal miracle, and everything that clears the big deal bar God tells us about in the Torah. It's the miracles that are there to make a point God tells us about in the Torah. It's a very interesting idea. By the way, just as an aside, what this all would mean, just to think about this for a second, this is an idea we've spoken about in other contexts, is that for Moshe Rabbeinu to be the person that he needed to be, he needed that his mother be someone who was the daughter of Levi. That's just how this was going to be. And that woman needed to be his mother. And that woman would have been a different person if she was Levi's granddaughter. And so, and the Jewish people are supposed to get out at a certain time. And Moshe Rabbeinu has to be a certain age. So God does these miracles to make it happen. A very interesting idea from the Ramban, and a very interesting thing to think about in terms of a perspective on what kind of miracles Torah records. Just want to see one more verse very quickly. Verse 29. Yosef's reunion with Yaakov. Vayasor Yosef merkav tov vayal across Israel aviv Goshna. Yosef went up to greet Yaakov's father. Vayiroi love. He appeared to him. Vayipol al tzavarav, and he fell on his neck. Vayefk al tzavarav od, and he cried further on his neck. How could we not do this with Debbie's background? So the standard approach to this pasuk is what people are familiar with from Rashi, which is that Yosef is so emotionally moved that he falls on his father's neck and he cries excessively on his father, or a great amount on his father's neck. Just for the record, you can look at the Ramban for yourself if you like. It's Ramban on Pasuk Kaftes. Just interesting, the Ramban understands the pasuk differently. Ramban thinks it's sort of disrespectful that Yosef will be kind of jumping on his father in that way. The Ramban actually says that Yaakov didn't recognize Yosef because of his unique garb. Thanks for the choice of picture, Debbie. Because of his unique garb reflecting his position, Yaakov did not recognize him. So it was only once Yosef was really up close to him. And then Yaakov is so emotionally taken that he falls on Yosef's neck. And this is really powerful to think about. Ramban says what it means by Yef Kal Tzavarav Od is that he cried on his neck more. The Ramban said it means that Yaakov had been crying all these years. You know, that whatever happened to Yosef, and now he cries in a new context. Just an interesting shot. Okay. Sorry for not covering much ground today, but I think these are interesting things.